after talking about the business, I'd reflect on things like life, career, success, and these things. And they are the ones that resonated most with all the Microsofties, and therefore with me. And then I enjoyed it so much that I kept it up. So even in 2012 or so, I wrote a series in Economic Times talking about my own transition, which at that time was still pretty early. And that did exceptionally well. So I realized this is a topic that is near and dear to everyone's heart. It's self-help, which is always the biggest section in any bookstore for good reason. And then LinkedIn came along and I would, periodically write. And I found again that as the world becomes more and more fluid, more and more turbulent and chaotic in a sense, as the nature of work is changing so rapidly, jobs are going away. But then for some people, it's just the best possible time, and compensation is reaching staggering levels, and you're seeing a unicorn born every week. So you're seeing all these paradoxes, and so people are, more and more bewildered, confused, anxious, etc. And so I said, look, this is a topic I have spent so much time on myself, just for myself, and so let me maybe write about it. And it may mean something to lots of people. This title, What the Heck Do I Do With My Life, was supposed to be just a working title. When you start with a publisher, they say, what's your book about? Well, it's about this. And then, we came to the end and we couldn't find a better title. And so it stuck. And the book's been out for nearly a month, not quite a month. And it's doing phenomenally well and resonating with lots of different types of people. And they're all dealing with this question. So yeah, that's how the title came to be. And I also confess that this was a very hard book to write because, in a sense, there's no new ideas. It's very old wine. People have said whatever needs to be said about all these issues, about identity, about work, about success and happiness, long time ago. And so the only thing that's different is context. So these times and sort of interpreting these ideas for the moment. And it was also difficult because you don't want to be pedantic and preachy and all that. So I said, look, I'll just say, look, this is my lived experience. These are the issues I struggled with, and this is where I came out. And you may agree or disagree. Mostly people will disagree, but that doesn't matter. As long as it causes you to think, my aim is served. So that's how this project came to be.
No, this was, Ravi, because at ILSS, we talk to so many senior corporate leaders almost on a weekly basis that are really looking for taking pause, and COVID has made them pause even more and say, hey, what are we doing? What the heck are we doing with our lives? So your book has sort of resonated deeply with us. Want to ask you this question on leadership. What is your understanding of leadership? Because when you say, and I totally agree with you, that leadership is an act. I have senior corporate leaders who'll ask me, what can we do? And I'm saying, and I'm like, look around you. You could do so many things. And your experiences of talking about Rehan, Padma Shri, and Shweta are phenomenal examples. So do share a little bit about your understanding of leadership and a little bit about Rehan, Padma Shri, and Shweta.
I don't think I would be exaggerating too much if I said leadership is the central issue of our time. And why I say that, and I devote a whole chapter to this. And why I say that is because when you look at the world around us, there are just so many issues, right? The issues at planetary scale. The whole planet is crumbling with climate change and environmental degradation and mass extinction and all that. You look at the country, there are any number of problems, whether it's around healthcare, education, poverty, hunger, any number of things, divisiveness. And then you look locally around wherever you live, and there are so many local issues ranging from waste management, which I focus on a lot, to help during COVID and living in harmony and just so. And what has struck me over the years is, look, and the truth, this is actually true within a company as well. Every company has lots of opportunities. And what it's lacking is leadership. So whether we're talking about the world, our local community, your organization, the problems are many. The solutions are also many. May not be perfect and in full measure, but certainly there are good ideas out there. There's resources, there's talent, there's know-how, there's everything. What's missing is leadership. And therefore, these problems not only persist, they grow. And so I've spent many years thinking about why is this so? And I came to the conclusion that we have a completely outdated and warped idea of leadership. We confuse leadership with position, title, formal authority, mandate, and all these things. And that's completely wrong, right? So first of all, the person with title of CEO or vice president or may not be a leader at all. They have just done well in the corporate politics. They may be arch bureaucrat, the antithesis of leadership in their behaviors. But we call them leader because we're conflating it with title and hierarchy and power. So to me, in the 21st century, if we are to flourish collectively, individually, I think we need to change our thinking about leadership. We have to stop waiting to be rescued by other people, expect others to do their job and start stepping up. And therefore, I say leadership is a verb, it's an act. And anybody and everybody is capable of this. It's not something you're born with or not. It's a decision to simply act. And I gave examples, three of whom you've named, of ordinary people with no formal power or authority stepping up to do extraordinary things. And I talk about this kid in the Teach for India school, and I think Annu Aga may be on this call and Archana is on this call, so they may even know this kid, Rehan. I talk about my neighbor here in Koramangala, Bangalore, Padma Shri, who's a housewife, who's become the waste warrior of Bangalore. Just amazing. I talk about another one of your alums, Shweta, who's built this movement called Kids Who Code. And I said, look, I think that's our model. They weren't waiting to be asked or given a mandate. They have no authority. They're leading by influence. They're following their passion and their convictions. And this is what we need to see much, much more of. And the second thing I say is not only does the world need more of all of us, it is also the defining skill of the 21st century. People are saying, oh, what skill should I learn? Should I go online to Coursera and learn Python programming? I say, yeah, sure. If that's what, floats your boat, you should. You may get a better job. But if you want a super skill, which if you have, people are going to come swarming to you and you don't have to go anywhere chasing anyone. One of them is leadership. If you have the ability to inspire people to go tackle a tough problem, go after an opportunity and make something of it, and you're able to do it with, as I said, no mandate, but yourself in the game, I think it's the most useful skill and ability you could develop. And then I give examples of how this is very much a learned skill. You start with little problems that you tackle, and from that you gain the self-confidence and the ability to tackle tougher problems. And that's the story of my life. I'm taking on now very big problems, but where I started was really little problems. And I give the example in UNICEF, where we go to the poorest of schools, deal with the poorest of children from the toughest socioeconomic backgrounds, and we get them to just start solving their own little vexing problems, like the school toilet is not working, nobody's doing anything. Well, stop waiting to be rescued. Get your friends together and fix it. And then that's where the change begins. So I could go on, but there's a whole chapter here.
No, absolutely. And in fact, one of the things that your friend Mekin has been working on is entrepreneurship curriculum with the Delhi.
Yeah.
I think that's fabulous. I think that's
Yeah.
and you make a case for, for being entrepreneurs and not job seekers. So, but Ravi, in these various transitions through your career, you've made, and I will come to the social sector because we do talk about that. What have, even through your corporate career, you've taken on different challenges. What has that taught you about yourself? What have you learned about yourself through the various sort of challenges and opportunities that came your way and that you took?
Well, a lot of it is, as you say, self-knowledge. So more than skills you learn and develop along the way. It's this understanding of, look, what sorts of environments, what sorts of problems really enable the best of me to come out. Okay. So gradually you move towards those kinds of opportunities and problems, those environments, and so forth. You learn what are you really good at and what are you not so good at. So, I learned over the years that I like solving really complex problems. Not, when you go in, these what are called complex adaptive challenges. Nobody has any idea of the solution. You don't, for sure. And so you bring only a beginner's mind to it. I like that. I like these problems also because no one organization, no one sector can solve it. You have to come together, and that requires a lot of persuasion and influencing skills. And I learned I'm decent at that. I'm probably very poor at other things like execution and sales and all those things. There are people who are much better at it. So gradually that allows you to move towards what you're good at, what gives you energy, etc. Um, in the book, I also make a very strong case for people to consciously, intentionally build their intangible assets. Okay, and this is something I learned looking back at my career, and rather than being planful about it. So, what are these intangible assets? Look, a lot of us worry about our tangible assets. How much do you have saved? Do you have a house, or, that you're happy living in? And is there enough to send the kids to school? Whatever, those kinds of things. Those are important. But what is even more important are things like, what is your, where do you have expertise in something? Do you have reputation? What's your reputation? Do you even have one? What do you have? Networks, and are these networks wide? Self-knowledge, all these things. And why these intangible assets are important is, in the world that we're in and the century we're going further into, there are going to be more and more shocks. COVID was a huge shock for everybody, but then there will be other shocks. The company that you're working for goes under, or they reorganize and you're out of a job, or whatever, some catastrophe strikes. These intangible assets do two things. First of all, they cushion your shock. And by the way, I should add to that health, family, relationships. So these things are what cushion your shock. And these are the assets that make you portable. They help you make these transitions. So I transitioned from making diesel engines to a software company, to a bank, to the social sector where I've done multiple things, and so on and so forth. And people say, hey, how do you make these transitions? It's very simple. If you have a good stock of these intangible assets, then you can carry them forward with you. And I also make the case that mostly, if you're cultivating these things, the opportunities come to you. You're not out there knocking on doors and applying for jobs and doing all that. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. And I'm going to take a follow-up question to that, Ravi, which is, as you know, we are always trying to get people to come into the social sector. We think we need everyone to be engaged, as you said, as a form of leadership. What has been your experience in the social sector with GAME, with the work you do at UNICEF? What could you shed light on as a sector? Obviously, it's very different, but what's been the sort of
Well, I started off actually in 2012, where some of us got together in Bangalore and saying, look, the world's falling apart, our country is falling apart. What can we do about it? And there were a bunch of us who were about the same life stage, late 40s, early 50s, feeling somewhat successful and now wanting to do constructive things. So we started as an experiment, Social Venture Partners, Bangalore. And I think there may be a few folks from SVP here today. And we had, at that point, no idea whether it would be successful or not. It was an experiment saying, look, let's pool our money, let's give of our time and expertise and networks and see if we can make some NGOs that we pick more successful. That turned out to be a very, very good experiment. Today, it's there in 6, 7 cities. But that's where I got my first exposure to the social sector and began to realize the true nature of some of the challenges, the depth of the challenges, etc. And that got me started. And the next thing I did was started GAME with Mekin. And that led to the work with UNICEF around young people around the world. And now it's leading to a new role in climate change. So I wouldn't have anticipated these things, but one thing led to the other. What have I learned? I've learned that, look, this is a critical sector. As we look at all the challenges around the world, around us, these are problems and fundamentally require leadership from this sector, but this sector can't do it alone. It needs to work in tandem with government, with private sector, with academia. So the nature of almost all our problems, even including the simplest ones like getting garbage off the street, requires everybody to work together. So that to me is profound. So if you look at all the work I do today, it's about trying to bring these cross-sector organizations together in an alliance mode to tackle these issues. Now, that sounds neat in theory, but we're figuring out just how hard it is to get everybody to come together and collaborate behind a common mission. You come to realize the importance of generosity, that we all need to support the sector and the people in that sector much more generously with resources. And these resources are financial, but also the intangible ones I talked about. Particularly these, the frontline organizations that are, what we call grassroots organizations, the extraordinary work they're doing with just such meager support. And so it has forced me to reflect on whether I'm being personally generous enough with all forms of capital. And we need a lot more leadership. And the point I wanted to also make today with this group is, yeah, sure, you want to cross over, that's fantastic, but there's a lot you can do to support the sector, solve these problems, even in the perch that you're sitting on today. You don't have to give it all up because that feels sometimes a little too much. You're not ready for it. And so we end up postponing doing things we could, sitting where we are.
No, that's fantastic, Ravi. Yes, absolutely. One is not asking you to. This is personal leadership, right? You could just do what you can within your circle of influence and control. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'm going to ask you now. Maybe this is a little bit of a spoiler, but I'm going to ask you a little bit of the things you've written in the book. Which, guys, I'm recommending read it. It's a wonderful book. Also, you're a voracious reader, Ravi. I mean, I thought maybe I should sit and write down the number of books you actually quoted in the book. And it's phenomenal. I will ask you a question on your favorite books. But my next question to you, which is specific to something you've mentioned in the book, is really, and it was fascinating for me, was your personal board. You talk about having a personal board. Tell us a little bit about this, because I thought that was a very interesting, interesting insight.
Yeah, I wrote about it in a recent HT article, and the single biggest takeaway from most people was the personal board. So no, I talk about it that I became a CEO at a very young age when I was quite inexperienced and foolish, and I think what saved the day was having a thoughtful board. The company had 10 people, and some of them were quite exceptional. and they made sure that there were guardrails and they were always available with their counsel and so forth. So I realized this was very useful. Then a few years later, I became the CEO of a public company. I was still very young. And one of the first things I decided to do is revamp the board and say, look, that was so useful. We've got some people here who are okay, well-intentioned, but they're not really, you know, going to be the best in terms of helping me take the organization forward. So I very intentionally put together a board at Cummins. And that, again, was stunningly important in helping us navigate the many, many challenges in our transformation. Then I went on to Microsoft, and this is a private company. And so there was no need for a board. It was just a 100% subsidiary of the parent. But again, I put together this time an advisory board, which was in many ways, even Bill Gates said it's better than the parent company board. Okay, it had people at that time like Dr. Ashok Ganguly as the chair, C.K. Prahlad, and Ramadurai, and Vijay Kelkar, and Dr. Mashelkar, and whatnot. And the company, we went through so many challenges in those 8 years that I was there. And without the counsel of these people, I don't know that we would have come through as well as we did. So that got me thinking, saying, look, I'm doing a reasonable job putting together these advisors, if you will, for the organization, but shouldn't I be more intentional about this for myself? And along the way, I did have a habit of consulting people on major decisions. Oh, should I marry this person or not? Should I take that job or not? Or whatever, any significant decision which had some sort of consequences to it. I was not a very sure person or necessarily a decisive person. So my habit was to talk to a few people, but I always sort of made up my own mind, but I found it very useful. So I began to actually make a list of all the people around the world who I sort of admired, who had a quality which we would probably recognize as wisdom. And not only did I like them, I think they had a bit of affection for me. And so I said, rather than this be random, let me at least keep this directory of names in front of me. And then based on the issue, I'll consult them. So I don't know whether Annu Aga is on this call. She threatened to join, but she's very much one of the people I've consulted on most of the major decisions I've made along the way. And there have been colleagues, teachers, people like Nandan, etc., who I've turned to for many, many important choices. And I think it's made a considerable difference to the quality of my decisions. Not that I've done what the consensus was or anything. And so I feel that more people should be intentional about putting together a few people. Now, this is a board in the virtual sense. It never meets. They don't know they're on your board, but it's a set of valuable people who care about you.
That's wonderful, Ravi. Thanks for sharing. And it's really, I wrote to you when I read the book. I sent you that message saying that, writing a book such as this is an act of generosity in a way, because you're almost paying it forward. It's hard work, to put together and write a book for people to read. But it's making sense to me that, you've listened, you've learned, people have been generous in sharing with you, and this is almost your way of paying it forward for other people.
Exactly.
Which is wonderful. And I think all the proceeds go to charity, guys. Do read it. It's a wonderful book. I'm going to talk to you about a couple of other things you mentioned in the book, and then maybe we'll open it up for audience questions as well. One is, of course, very interestingly, you talk about the S-curve in your book. Ravi, I'm on my 6th career shift. I think I'm finally, yes. I've had many career shifts, and I think it's the norm. Maybe I'm a little older, but for my daughter, for my kids or the millennials, it's going to be the norm, like you talk about it. What can you share a little bit about how you can go about discovering the next S-curve, because you talk about the S-curve in your book, and so just elaborate a little bit on that.
Well, first of all, the concept.
Yeah.
So the concept is actually from the world of technology, where you have a new technology, and then in the beginning, it's sort of its adoption is flat, then it goes through an explosive growth, like the PC did, and then eventually the growth plateaus, and it's replaced by a new technology, in this case, the mobile phone, and so forth. So the point is that the idea that you join an organization and you spend a long time with it and you rise up a career ladder, etc., is obsolete. It's going to apply to fewer and fewer and fewer people. For most people, I think we're going to have to learn to see our work life as a series of projects, sometimes two, three projects, maybe with the same organization, and there's no career progression in the sense of climbing a ladder from assistant general manager to deputy general manager. That's gone. So if that's gone, what do you replace it with? I think you replace it with this a notion like the S curve, where the S, the y-axis, if you will, is about learning. It's about impact and these kinds of metrics. And then eventually your learning plateaus, and you say, are you getting bored? And you say, what the heck do I do with my life? And you realize it's time for change. Or sometimes life itself gives you a shove and you have to change whether you like it or not. So I talk about this, how do you deal with this, right? And more, like you have made multiple transitions, and it's going to become more the norm. What you are, careers are going to be exceptional for a very short time. So the two things you have to do. First thing you have to do is cultivate those intangible assets, because that's what you can take to your next thing. But then there's also the point that you come to a fork in the road. You know what you don't want to do, which is whatever you're doing. You don't want to continue with this. You don't like who you're working for. The work environment around you isn't necessarily uplifting, whatever. But if there's a paycheck, you don't know what else to do. So you just grimly sort of keep going. So I say, look, if you're at that point, and many times in my life I was there, you can't just reason your way to your next S-curve. You can't just think your way here. What you have to do is a lot of experimentation. And somebody called them micro experiments. So for instance, in 2010, 11, I was at that point in Microsoft, and I was clear I didn't want another job. But I didn't know what else to do. So I tried over 2-3 years, many things. And, for instance, we started SVP. I wrote a book. I started teaching. I joined some boards. And then in the book, I talk about many things I tried, which didn't work out. We got a team together. We had a startup. We even got funding. And then I realized I wasn't passionate about it. I tried to bring Amazon to India, not as an employee, but as a possible partner, junior partner. That didn't work out. So, I tried 10 things, maybe 2 things worked out. But this process of experimentation, you figure out 2 things. Look, which doors are open and there's a welcome mat, and which doors are firmly shut. Then you realize, well, I thought that would be interesting, but when I actually tried it, I realized I'm not really passionate about it, or it's a good hobby, but not the main course. So you discover self-knowledge as well. And then one day what is to be next comes to you and you're able to recognize it. So that's how I suggest that you figure out what your next curve might look like. It's a lot of intentional experimentation. And the other encouraging thing I say is, look, sometimes it feels really drastic to resign and then go out there without anything. Some people are fortunate, you have the courage or the means or the wherewithal to do it. But for a lot of people, that's tough. So I say, look, you can do a lot of these experiments while you're still doing what you're doing. right? You can do them on the weekends. You can take a vacation and try. You can take a sabbatical. You can take a sabbatical and teach. You can start volunteering weekends at a startup. You can do all these things. You can start volunteering at an NGO and say, is this social sector really all that great? And am I ready to go full time or no? I love it, but it's my weekends. So a lot of these experiments can be done at fairly low cost of failure.
Yeah, absolutely. Ravi, explain to us what you mean by the passion economy.
Yeah, the passion economy is actually a term that's becoming more and more widely used. There's a book by that name by this guy called, I think, Adam Davidson. And the point is this, when people ask me, what should I do? What's the generic advice? The writer Charles Handy, I think, says it's best. He says, do the best you can with what you're best at and get paid for it. It just stayed with me. And, it's today translated into this Japanese term called ikigai. It is find the convergence, the intersection between what you're good at, what you enjoy doing, and what the world needs and appreciates. And if you can get to that intersection, that's where you're going to, feel nourished. You're going to do your best work. It's sustainable. Okay, particularly if you can get paid somewhat for it. And I'm saying that in a world where jobs of the traditional sort are unstable, first of all, they're few and far between, as we are seeing in our country. They're unstable in the sense you never know when it goes away, poof. When we're living much longer, and therefore, certainly beyond a certain point, no one's going to give you a job. Everybody wants somebody younger. You've got to learn to be able to be self-employed, stand on your own feet. And the most viable way of doing that is to find something that you're good at and enjoy, and which people are willing to pay some amount of money for, so you can make a livelihood out of it. And so I give lots and lots and lots of examples, and you yourself are an example of that. My sort of life over the last decade is another example. And I talk about my friend Anshu Moore. He's fabulous. He was one of the top sales guys at Microsoft, and he's now one of the very successful stand-up comedians. So there's no limit to what you could be doing around your skill. And, every day you see examples of people who are doing that. And in the beginning, people say, oh my God, that's so scary. Actually, you should be scared if you're in a job, because you're way more vulnerable to forces out of your control. The company reorganizes, boom, your division's gone, your job's gone. You get a new manager and she doesn't like you, okay, or you don't like her, or whatever, So you're way more vulnerable as an employee in a VUCA world than you are being in somewhat control over your destiny. And yeah, and again, it requires for some of us a little bit of experimentation till you find that sweet spot. But once you do, man, it's a way better life. There's no going back.
Oh, absolutely. I can tell you, I wake up in the morning super excited. So this has been, it's taken me 6 versions to get here, but I've got here finally. Ravi, I'm going to come into audience questions because I did want to sort of, mix it up. So this is from Malu Natarajan. I don't know if you know her, but she has sent a whole bunch of questions, like a rapid fire. But one of them was particularly interesting, which was, what would your best friend say that he or she liked the least about you? What's that thing that people say behind your back that's not, or even on your face? That's not.
They say it on my face, actually. I think my best friends are my best friends because they can be very frank. No, I think I'm temperamental. And so moody, temperamental, and I'm, fun and joyous to be around, and I'm in a good mood, and I'm not crabby and negative otherwise. I think a lot of them feel that I'm too stingy with my time. They wish I would be more generous with my time, more in the relationship. And I think about that abundance versus scarcity mentality. I think in some aspects of my life, I had that abundance mindset. Unfortunately, on time, it's still a work in progress. So those would be two things. I can go on. It's a long list.
Okay. She has a whole lot of questions, but maybe I'll ask one more and then maybe we'll come back to some of these later. But her next question is, would you rather go 100 years into the future or the past for a day? Malu, I don't know what your idea
I'd
of.
like to, I don't know, but personally, I'd like to go into the future. Look, the future is a mixed bag. It has, headwinds and negative forces, and it has tailwinds and positive things. And I sense it has always been that way. Okay, one of the chapters begins with a quote from The Tale of Two Cities, uh, and it fits perfectly at this moment. So, we think we live at an extraordinary moment, but each generation thinks so too, and each one thinks the future has all kinds of. But we're living at an extraordinarily difficult time for sure, with climate change and a crumbling planet, a divided, polarized society, lots of hate, technology being used more destructively than positively. I mean, there's just, you could go on. But overall, I mean, whether the future turns out to be better or worse than the present is not a given. It depends on us. And if it's always a tug of war, and so if more of us start tugging it and tipping it in the right direction, then the future will be better. But yeah, I'd much rather sort of time travel forwards than backwards.
Ravi, you talk about learning agility, but more importantly, you talk about in this VUCA world, these three sets of meta skills. And I don't want you to, I mean, there is a book, guys, read the book, but just broadly, if you want to just touch upon what you call them, that are really going to help you
Sure.
build that learning mindset.
So, one of the common questions that's there on people's mind is, what skill should I learn? And should I go get a certificate in data science? Should I go and specialize in the ethics of AI or whatever? And if that's what interests you, that's fine. But the problem with all this is things are moving fast. New jobs are being invented. So how on earth are you going to predict what skills? The skills are a moving goalpost. What's hot today is a commodity very soon. So sure, you should do whatever you do to get the technical skills that help you find, a livelihood. But I was more interested in, are there certain skills which are more fundamental, which are going to be valuable 100 years from now as it is today? And even as AI is capable of doing more and more things that human intelligence, used to do, what are the domains that are going to be AI and machine proof? Okay, so that's how I approached it. And I came down to the conclusion that there are 4 skills, which are called meta skills or super skills, which if you are able to get proficient at, good at, you're going to be fine. One is this learning agility. And learning agility is not just learning a new skill. It's the ability when you're thrown into a situation which is completely outside your experience, that you don't panic or become a victim or anything, but you learn to figure it out and eventually be successful. The way we've all adapted to COVID, for instance, is a good example, but some people have adapted better than others. So learning agility. The second one is an entrepreneurial mindset. Not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur or can necessarily be a successful entrepreneur. But I think there are aspects of an entrepreneur which are incredibly useful for everyone. For instance, the ability to see an opportunity and act on it is very useful, because every problem we have is also an opportunity in disguise. Okay, so An ocean filled with plastic and landfills filled with plastic is a problem. It's also an opportunity to build a business. So an entrepreneurial mindset is second. A third one is what are called 21st century skills, which is shorthand for getting along with people, which is communication, collaboration, teamwork, problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, all these things. Now, it turns out, even as AI is becoming more powerful and robots are becoming more sort of capable, the human interaction is also becoming much more crucial. Most problems require people to come together in an interdisciplinary, cross sector way to solve for all the reasons we talked about earlier. So these skills become very useful. And the fourth super skill is leadership. So I say, look, if you can get proficient at these and exceptional at one or two, you've got it made. Okay. And I also talk about why being a generalist in this environment is probably safer and more useful than being a deep specialist. So, yeah, but read the chapter. We're giving too much away out here.
No, but it's fascinating. So no, there's a lot more in the book than what Ravi is sharing here. Tell us, I'm really interested to know a little bit about your association with the global climate, uh, uh, global climate.
It's called the Global Energy Alliance for People
Oh,
and Planet. It's a big
oh,
name.
okay.
So look, the whole point I think everybody realizes is that the world's at a tipping point in terms of climate. We have to get to net zero no later than 2050. Even then, it's too late, but you may be able to escape the worst of the consequences of a 1.5 degree rise. And you can't say you have 30 years to do it. In fact, we have to get to somewhere between 50 to 70% in this decade. So it's again it's one of these curves which is actually the inverse S. It has to. So the big shift here is around energy. We have to get away from non-renewable, polluting fuels to renewables. And left to its own device, this energy transition is probably not going to happen fast enough. So Rockefeller Foundation and a few others came together to create an alliance, which is called the Global Energy Alliance. And this alliance has three goals, which is number one is taking 4 billion tons of CO2 out of the atmosphere in this period. Number two is there's still 1 billion people who don't have access to energy and still collecting wood or burning coal or doing something, and the grid may not reach them for a long time. So how do you provide energy access to another 1 billion people? And then in the process, how do you create productive livelihoods and good jobs for 150 million people? And so the Global Energy Alliance is trying to build a $100 billion financing facility to support these transitions and come up with catalytic projects that shrink the time to accomplish this. And I've been playing, as a trustee of RF, a very engaged role and perhaps soon a leadership role around this.
Ravi, there are a couple of questions coming in. This is from Vikas, who we both know. Hi, Ravi and Anu, great to see you. Totally
Vikas Arora?
Yes, Arora. Yes.
Oh, hi.
He's written, Ravi, totally relate and agree with you with the intangible assets concept you spoke about. Any thoughts on purpose? Purposes tend to be more tangible in traditional career journeys. But once these tangible material purposes are served, hard to find a new one. At the same time, having one is important because it gives one energy. Should purpose be intangible too after a stage? Any thoughts?
Yeah, well, again, there's a chapter 8 in the book on where purpose fits in and how, at least I tried to find it for myself. And so I begin with the quote by Mark Twain. It says that there are only 2 days that matter in anyone's life, the day you were born and the day you figured out why you were born. And sadly, a lot of people live their lives out without ever thinking about the second question. Well, if you're happy with that, that's okay. But to be miserable and not have a sense of, what this life is all about is bad, because then you'll go to your end regretting a life wasted. So I think purpose is very important, particularly after COVID. I think it's woken up a lot of us into saying, look, what is this life all about, particularly given how uncertain life is? And that's, I think, one of the factors behind what's called the great resignation, the great shuffle, reshuffle, etc. So I think it's an exciting time where a lot of us are asking that question. The problem with purpose, again, is I don't know whether it's possible to just sit and reason your way to the answer. What should my purpose be? It's an experiential process. You have to try things and you discover it over time. Um, and what would I say to Vikas? I would say, look, man, uh, devote yourself to these micro experiments and see what really gives you a lot of joy. Um, and one of the problems in finding purpose is we are so deeply programmed and conditioned by our definition of what success is. Okay. So, we care so much about what others think, what society thinks, and it forces us to stay on the treadmill a lot longer. And so you need to gradually wean yourself off that definition of success and come to your own intrinsic definition. And yeah, and it's not easy. It is an incredible sort of lifelong journey. So, who was that who wrote Man's Search for Meaning? Suddenly,
Frankl.
yeah, Viktor Frankl. So, yeah, so he says that is the central purpose of our existence, right? It's not just to live a good life, a comfortable life, and enjoy it. Of course, those things are important, but to discover meaning and purpose is the meaning of life, and so we have to do that. And yeah, it's taken me a long time. I think I've come to a reasonable enough uh, understanding of my purpose, but that's it. Yeah, we'll see if it stands the test of time. But yeah, get on with it, Vikas.
I've been trying to get him on the other cross over the other side, but not quite yet. But hopefully this might nudge him along. There's a question by Vishal Dhale. It's an amazing and inspiring to hear you today. Thanks a ton. My question is, as per you, what is the success rate of the people who cross over from corporate to social? And what, according to you, are the few things which make them a success vis-a-vis others?
First of all, I'm very skeptical of terms like success and failure. Okay, they're powerful words, and I've learned to distrust. Okay, so what is success? What is failure? Okay. Second thing is, I wouldn't know how many are successful or not. Having made that transition fairly joyfully, I can only say that 2-3 things that made it, that I think are important. I think one is humility. Okay, you can't come in from the corporate sector thinking you know it all, and these poor duffers out here, they're messing around cluelessly.
I call that the rescue complex.
Yeah,
I'm always worried that people shouldn't have a savior complex or a rescue complex.
Perfect, much better way. But I've seen that you have people with good intentions, but like bull in a china shop because they've got this rescue complex or a certain arrogance without even realizing they're being arrogant. Second thing, so humility is important. Second is, I think, incredible empathy and incredible curiosity. So you need to bring that beginner's mind and be curious about understanding why things are the way they are, etc. So those are 2 things. Then I would say the ability to connect with people, build relationships with people who are unlike you, I think helps a lot, because a lot of the people you're going to meet are people very different. and to find a human connection with everyone is really central to being able to eventually be impactful. Why should they follow you? Okay, you have no authority, as I said. You can only get a few people to uh, want to be part of whatever you're trying to build. So I would say that's it. And then passion and commitment. Okay, I think a lot of people I see stick their toe in the water, and that's fine to start with. But you come back 5 years later, it's still only the toe, and neither they're getting much out of it, nor is the sector getting anything out of it. At some point, you have to, really, really decide that you're going to commit.
To
And
burn the bridge. We tell them burn the bridge.
yeah, yeah, but yeah, not necessarily burn the bridge so much as look. I haven't burned my bridges with the corporate sector, but I spend less than 10% of my time. But I think that is an important 10%. It keeps a connection alive with a crucial sector. Okay. So, but I don't dream of coming back to it and being full time or anything. In that sense, it's an irreversible move. So I would say commitment is at some point is also a very crucial thing. So these would be some factors within my personal experience.
Also listening, Ravi. Don't you think
This,
listening is a
I said empathy, and to me, listening, empathy are part of a package
yes,
there. Because if you're not listening, you're not going to, the heart is not going to open.
true.
So mind, heart, everything open. Great
There's a question.
questions, by the way.
There's a question by Gayan Batra. Life
Oh,
skills are important and basics. However, how does one balance the need to continue improving the basics versus the newer skills of ML AI software? So life skills versus skills.
I know, Gayan. And I would say, look, draw solace from the fact that I haven't kept up with AI or ML, and I'm doing perfectly fine. Yeah, look, the world is exploding in sort of complexity, and there's so too many things to master or even be proficient at or know anything at all about, and I don't worry about it. I'm on a path, and I try and learn things which are important to keep progressing on that path. I'm also humble enough to know what I don't know. So I surround myself with people who are very good at those things. Okay. So as long as Mekin knows AI and ML, I don't worry about it. Okay. So look, none of us are individually whole. We can only be collectively whole. So a lot of what I have tried to do over the years is build teams which are good, teams which have all these skills. And that's obviously a fluid thing. So I don't hope to have either proficiency, let alone mastery of a lot of important things that are happening in the world. It's futile.
I'm going to I have because we have literally 7 minutes, and I know you have a board meeting. So really quickly, Lakshmanan Venkat. Oh Lord, what did you all do with that question, guys? It's
Gone.
too. It's gone. My team is all. Oh, here it is. Lakshmanan Venkateswaran, is GDP a yardstick for prosperity, or has it become a growth like cancer, the way we define it?
I think
Your.
I think he is in asking the question the way he has answered it. Okay.
Okay.
It's an important metric, but it's too narrow a measure. And India's obsession with that right now is, I think, enormously problematic because you can leave a lot of people behind and still achieve that growth. And that's what we are doing right now with our model of development. So yeah, Lakshmanan. But the problem is we haven't devised better metrics. So one of the economists who's influenced me profoundly is a Nobel Prize winner called Ned Phelps. And his two books, which are my Bibles, are on mass flourishing. How do you create a society where flourishing is pervasive? Okay. And then what are the values, the policy interventions, and what are the metrics. So, good news is a lot of people, smart people, are applying their minds to coming up with broader metrics, better metrics. But but right now we're stuck with this super narrow measure. It's like profitability of a company. If you just focus on either top line or bottom line, you miss out a lot.
Ravi, I'm going to ask you just the last question because we are down to 1 minute. How would you like to be remembered?
Yeah, look, I'm long past the time when I want to be remembered. I've come to, there was a time when you're young and foolish, and you want to change the world. B, you want to be remembered, and neither is going to happen. The reality is, like footprints in the sand, all of us are very quickly forgotten, except by a very small people whose lives were intertwined with our own. So I don't spend any time wanting to be remembered. I want to simply live my life in a way that when I, get to the end, I have as few regrets as possible for myself. And that's how I'm making my choices.
Thank you, Ravi. There were, I must confess, a few more questions that did come in, but in the interest of time, I couldn't ask them. But it's been wonderful talking to you
No,
today. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for this book. It's been a great book, certainly required reading for my alumni that are seeking purpose, meaning, looking at the sector and all that. So thank you very much, and have a
I
good evening.
appreciate I appreciate this opportunity. I appreciate 60 people who could be doing something else but chose to join us. And for the most part, I do hope many more people read the book and think about it. And all the best.
All the best, Ravi.